I'm going to talk about what was one of the most difficult things that I actually faced in New Guinea. I talked about a little bit yesterday. It was medical. And I talked to so many of you students that are going into medical work. And, you know, Jesus' ministry was threefold. It was to the poor, the sick, and the hungry. And we're always going to be involved with the poor, the sick, and the hungry. But in New Guinea, it was really hard for me. And I kind of have a weak stomach. You know, when I cut off that toe that I talked about yesterday, you know, that afternoon we were having a lunch, and of course everything was out of cans or dried vegetables. And we opened this can, and it was a can of hot dogs. And all I could visualize is this toe. No, that's the honest truth. It was about 12 years before I could face a hot dog. But now I can eat a hot dog now because I like hot dogs, but you know, that visual picture of that toe will always be there every time I eat a hot dog. But anyway, I remember when I gave my first injection. You know, we do get some medical training, and but it took a long time to break through that barrier of because they were afraid of us, and until you really establish a trust and a friendship and rapport. But they were really afraid of this needle that I mentioned. They called it the same as the pencil, Tuddian, and they said, you know, you're not shooting us with that thorn. Well, there was this old man. His name is Nokian. He just attached himself to me. He was the oldest man in the village, a very powerful medicine man. And he was really excited about when he discovered that his language was being written. And he wanted to help me because he couldn't understand why it was taking us so long to learn the language. You know, we'd been there 6 months and we still couldn't speak right. And they had no clue what was involved in learning another language. And when I remember when he really finally discovered what it was we were doing, he called the whole village together and had us stand up in front of the whole village. And he said, "You know what these two are doing? These two in there carving our talk on the banana leaf like the white man's talk. But I don't know what's wrong with those two in front of the whole village." He said, "What's the matter with you two? What's wrong with your heads? You know, this is a simple language." You know, he said, "Yeah, in fact, everybody in the village speaks this language." And so that's when he decided to adopt us and help us to learn this language. And so he came every day and was a wonderful teacher. But one day he got really sick. And the serious thing is that when you get cerebral malaria, you have about 6 hours before you go into a coma. And after so long, they call the medicine men, and they spit and they blow and they chew on these plants that they supposedly contains a very powerful spirit. But after so long, they just bury him alive. And that was an incredible experience to go through for almost 7 years before I broke through that barrier. But anyway, the old man got very sick, and I heard the wailing going all night long. And they said, well, he goes in and out of, well, he dies, and then he comes back to life. He dies, you know, goes into the coma and then comes back. And we just want you to know that we're going to plant him tomorrow. That means bury him. And I said, well, you know, he's our village father. You know, he's been working and helping us with learning the language. And so why can't I just give him the injection with this needle? Oh, no. He's really gonna just die, and he's not gonna come back again. You know. And I said, you know, this medicine will help. This medicine is for what his problem is. No, you can't touch him. And so they said, tomorrow we're going to bury him. Well, I heard the wailing all night long, and I was just said, Lord, when are we going to break through this barrier? This is just an awful thing. There was a time when I just couldn't go anymore. I'd ask him, you know, they say, well, so-and-so has died. You need to come to the grave. And I'd ask him, well, is he still pulling wind? Is he still breathing? I said, oh, yeah, he's still pulling wind, but he's dead. I said, you know what? I just can't watch that anymore because in my culture, this is really hard. And so I heard the wailing all night long and figured that they were going to bury him in the morning. Anyway, somebody came rushing to the house early in the morning. We're still having breakfast. He said, Marilyn, we brought the old man here, and he's almost dead, and we want you to come on down here right now and shoot him. You know, with a thorn. Oh, I was so excited. My first live case. You know, up to this point, I've been practicing on oranges. Well, that's part of the training. Anyway, so I got 2 syringes ready, one with chloroquine and quinine, and another syringe with penicillin for pneumonia. And I had this little fishing tackle box with my medicine, and I came down the steps, and I could see people were gathering. The whole village was just kind of gathering. Here was the old man. You know, he just had a vine on, so he was ready for the injection. He was holding onto the post of the house. They were kind of holding him up. I mean, he really looked like he was almost dead, really. And anyway, everybody was coming, so I figured out, well, they've probably been talking about this all night long. Try the medicine on him. He's going to die anyway. And so the chief of the village came up because Nokian was from his clan, and I have been working with this man who's the head of the village, owned all the land. We were trying to get him to give us some property so we could build a little church and a school. At this point, we're just sitting under coconut trees with our Sunday services. But anyway, so the chief came up to me and told me what was wrong with Nokian, the old man. See, he's got a very bad headache. And see, in his chest hurting. See, in his ribs hurting. I said, I have medicine for the head and the chest and the ribs. And so, you know, everybody's moving close. So I kneel down, get some cotton to put on, you know, rub a spot on his bottom. Now they're really moving in close. And I put the syringe, you know, on the needle, and I go to give him the injection, and the needle just went boing. It bent right over. I said, oh my goodness, this is my first injection. Everybody came to watch this. And my mind is going 100 miles an hour. And so I just pretended that's the way it's supposed to be. I just yanked that needle out, bent down, got another needle, and just reared back and gave him the injection. No, I'm not a nurse. But, you know, so I gave both syringes, and he hardly moved. But then I could see that the chief of the village was so angry. I mean, he started yelling at me. I told you that he had a very bad headache, and his chest hurt, and his ribs hurt. Now you wasted all the medicine down here. Hey, we're never sick down here. This is a good area. I don't know about you white people, but we're never sick here. This is the dumbest thing we have ever seen. And everybody was just shaking their heads and just, you know, it was devastating. It was devastating. And I thought, oh, Lord, why didn't you help me with this? Now I'm blaming the Lord. And they carried the guy, and Nokian put him in the canoe, and we're burying him this afternoon. Wow. But within 40 minutes, somebody came running to the house. Marilyn Nokian, he's sitting up, and he's talking, and he's eating, and he's laughing. And that afternoon, my friends, Nokian, this old man, was walking through the village as though he had never been sick. Now listen, I don't know a whole lot about medicine, but I do know that was not the medicine. That was the power of God. You know what? Using a Hoosier farm girl that didn't know how to use this right. Remember what I said yesterday? You don't have to do it just right. Oh, I really did it wrong. They didn't know it, though. I pretended. And God turned it into an incredible miracle. That old man was the first of all the 162 medicine men to ask Jesus into his life. And that started a miracle all the way through that village. No, we don't have to do it just right. Whatever you have in your hand, give it to God. As I mentioned yesterday, he needs a vessel. He needs a vessel. Remember Moses and the stick. Well, when I started to get ready for translation, it takes about 4 or 5 years before you get to that point. And the old man was one that really wanted to help. He was listening and hearing the stories that I was trying to explain in the language about Jesus, the way Jesus did healing. And he was just thrilled with this book. Doesn't that kind of blow your mind? I mean, these people, you know, that knew nothing about Jesus, nothing about this book. And yet they were ready. Like every person in the world is ready. The fields are ripe unto harvest. You know what that means? That means they're waiting. That means they're waiting to be, you know, to receive the Word of God. That's what it means. Every single person in the world has been created in God's image for this book. Everybody. I used to think when I heard these little talks in my church, my little church, and pastor would say, well, you know, there's people all over the world that's waiting for the gospel. I said, and I would think as a young person, well, how could they be waiting for something they don't know anything about? They are waiting. The fields are ripe to harvest. And so when I started to do Bible translation, you know, God has such an incredible sense of humor. There was this old man, and now he has a green belt. I had given him a pair of pants, but he gave the pants away and just kept the green belt. And he also has a T-shirt, which a T-shirt, I don't know if you've ever gone to Bill Gothard. I mentioned this last year, but my church sent me all these T-shirts with this theme. And so he's got this green belt and the T-shirt, and the T-shirt says, be patient, God is not finished with me yet. Well, that is for sure. But anyway, the old man wanted to help. And there was 14 little boys that were running around the jungle naked, 5, 6, and 7-year-olds. They were kind of like the gang at the village. And they'd climb up the steps of my little thatch roof house, and every time I went near them, you know, they were just afraid of the white skin. But eventually they realized that I was going to hurt them. But they really wanted to come in and help the old man, you know, help us with learning the language and certainly help us with this translation of this book. They were fascinated about what was in that book. And but anyway, these 14 young boys kind of attached themselves to me. And as they got a little bit older, they wanted to learn how to run the outboard motor. Well, we were hoping someday we could teach people how to run that outboard motor, because the river is very tricky, and again, it's full of crocodiles. And you know, we were always getting lost or getting stuck on a sandbank, and they know the river like the back of their hand. And they were all envious of this outboard motor, and so this was time now. So I started to train these young boys, and they were like 12, 13 years old, 11, 12, 13 years old. And so there were 8 of them that I was actually training how to run the outboard motor, how to change the spark plugs and how to clean the fuel line. And when you take a trip, we had this checklist. You got to have extra propeller, extra fuel line, plenty of pins and the spark plugs, and you know, just a whole list. And if you're going downriver, going with the current, it only takes 20 gallons to get down to the airstrip, and that means, you know, 4 5-gallon tanks of gas. But when you're coming upriver with a heavy load, and these canoes are, you know, 60 feet long, they're definitely motorized canoes for outboard motors, and they'll carry 2 tons. So when you're coming upriver, you got to have at least 25 gallons of gas. And by the way, gas over there is $8 a gallon, so don't complain about how expensive gas is over here. And so we need 5-gallon tanks of gas. So we were going downriver, which we do every 3 months to get our supplies. They were doing great. I mean, they were just naturals of handling that motor and, you know the river well. Well, so we spent the night. Next morning, we load all of our supplies on the canoe, and we start heading upriver. Now, you can't get to the village before dark, because you're going against the current. You have a heavy load, and so, you know, we have our flashlights. They call torches. And so after the sun went down, we got out our torches, and we're spanning the river. We've been driving or riding for about 2 hours in darkness. And they're spanning. We all have our flashlights. And it's interesting when you're traveling at night, because crocodiles come out at night. And if your light hits the head of a crocodile, their eyes light up bright red, and makes a very interesting trip at night. And but anyway, we've been traveling about 2 hours at night, and we just passed the village of Kupkain. Now, I know when you pass the village of Kupkain, which is a traditional enemy village, we only have about 45 minutes to an hour before we're going to get to the village, and you're just kind of anxious to get there. So we passed the village of Kupkain, and the motor stops. So I'm waiting for them to change the tank, and the current is very fast, and it's pushing us back downriver. And when you're just drifting, I mean, clouds of mosquitoes just cover you. So I'm saying, I said, hurry up, the mosquitoes are just eating me alive. And so they're fooling around back there, and pretty soon one of the guys says, Merlano, opkare karamegakora, Merlin. We're out of strong water. What? That's the word for gas. We're out of gas. I mean, how many tanks did we have? 4. 4? You know, when you're going upriver, it's 5. You know, this whole trip was teaching you how to do this. You want to know how to do this. You know, I'm getting really angry. I mean, we are a long way from help. And there is no way you can paddle these huge dugout canoes up against the current. There's no way. And I know from this point in the river, it's going to take 4.5 days to drift back to the airstrip. There are no gas stations along the way. There's no help along the way. And so I'm just saying, no, what are we going to do now? If you just would have followed the instructions, this is what you guys want to be drivers. You know, when you get angry, I'm telling you, when you get angry, you really speak the language fluently. It just rolls off of your tongue. I don't even want to tell you what I said to those men. And pretty soon, you know, I'm just really very upset because there was nothing we could do but drift back to the airstrip, nothing. And so they said, Marilyn, Marilyn, you just sit down in that canoe and fasten your mouth. Whoa. I said, well, that's just fine. I can just sit here and I can just be quiet, but what are we going to do? What are we going to do? We're out of gas. Well, we're going to adi kumisi sleep. We're going to pray. Oh, we're going to pray. I mean, what are you going to pray about? We're out of gas. You know, at this point, I'm totally useless to God. I'm just angry. But those 8 young boys we'd been translating, and they said, well, you told us that Papa God could see wherever we are. Can he see us? I said, yeah, he can see us. Well, can't he see that we're in trouble? Yeah, he can definitely see that we're in trouble. And doesn't he know how to run outboard motors? You know, I hate those kind of questions. I said, of course. They said, well, we're just going to pray. And they started to pray. They put their hands on those empty tanks. They put their hands on the outboard motor. And they said, oh, Papa God, you can see that we got motor trouble here. And Papa God, and Papa God, we're in a whole lot of trouble with Marilyn. They had that right, but they didn't have to tell God. But Papa God, you've created all those stars up there. You've created the moon, the sun, and Papa, none of it ever falls down. And that's a lot of power, and so Papa, you're enough. Papa God, you're enough, but we don't need any gas. And they pulled the rope on that outboard motor. And that motor started, and my friends, we went for 45 minutes to an hour without one drop of fuel. Without one drop of fuel. And I got to think, Lord, how does that work? How does that work? You know, I'm still trying to figure out, how did Jesus do that? All those miracles, how did Jesus turn water into wine and all those kind of things? You know, I guess they don't know any better. You know, the innocent, childlike faith. The kind of faith that God would love us to have. They don't know about 911 and AAA and all that kind of thing. That's why you hear so many incredible stories in areas like those areas that are untouched. They're just like children that they can just believe God for anything. You know, when the disciples went to Jesus and they said, well, who's going to be the greatest in the kingdom of heaven? You know what Jesus did? He got a little child. Just a little child, and stood that child in front of, in the middle of all them, and he said, I tell you people the truth, and unless you can humble yourself as a little child and have the faith of a little child, you will never please me. And I know when you were little, a little girl, a little boy, and when you got scared or when you were afraid or when you were in trouble, you ran to your mother and your dad and you just hung on to their leg because you believed that your mom and dad could do anything. And that's the picture. If we could just hang on to God and believe that God could do anything. He could do anything. And those little boys became my translators. And we started with Genesis. We started with Genesis, the creation story. Here they are. Here's my team. The old man with the green belt and the t-shirt. And 14 little boys that were running around the jungle naked. And we started with, in the beginning, their creation story, the creation story. Well, they have their creation stories. One clan came from the crocodile. Another clan came from the python. Third clan came from the wild boar. And the fourth clan came from the wild cassowary bird. And and through those 4 creation stories, they could explain every part of creation. But the most amazing thing about it, it's not all that far off from Genesis. They do have a knowledge of God. That's what Romans says. No man is without an excuse. It's all there, my friends. They just need somebody to come and take them another step. And so here they are, sitting on the bar floor. Now just kind of visualize that. Well, don't visualize it too much, but in the beginning, oh my goodness, they were so excited with this creation story. How God created all those things up in the sky, and the sun, the moon, the stars, and everything in the river. They're river people, they're gatherers and hunters, and all those things in the jungle. But every day one of those little boys would say, well, Marilyn, when are you going to tell us how Papa God created man? I said, well, we're not there yet. He's got to create the whole world first. But every day we gathered together, sitting on the bark floor. Every day one of the little boys would say, is this the day? Is this the day you're going to tell us how Papa God created man? I said, this is not the day. Well, we got all these verses, and it's in chapter 2. Well, they didn't know anything about verses or chapter 2, but we finally got there. I said, okay, this is the day. I'm going to tell you how Papa God created man. It goes like this. Adi kamui nu wikamam. Haibriam diu migi no kuki kaikikam. Papa God created man from the mud, the dirt, the ground. Papa God, he formed that, and mud and dirt, and then he blew wind into it, blew wind. Oh my goodness, it was so quiet. And these little boys were looking up at me with their dark eyes, and their mouths were open, and they said, is that it? I said, oh my goodness, they're not going to believe this creation story. And then they started to buzz and talk, and then pretty soon the old man says, Marilyn, we've always wondered. We'd always wondered, did we really come from a crocodile? Did we really come from a python? And my friends, to this day, I'm not aware of a single person that's ever questioned or doubted this creation story, the power of this book. Well, we went on, and some of the words are very difficult to find. I mean, how do you find a word for justification, sanctification, righteousness, and all those kind of mercy, grace? I mean, how many times do you use those words every day? Oh, they're there. You find them through unusual stories, something that happens. The vocabulary that we use every day is a very small amount of words. Some of the words we use just over every day, well, they're the same thing. But there are a whole lot of words in our dictionary. Eventually we use some of them. And I remember how we found the word for sin. Now that's not an easy word to find, S-I-N. I mean, we can name sins, but how do we find the word? I mean, how do you point to some of these words? How do you act them out? Through unusual stories. And something different happens in the village, and I get them to tell the whole story on the tape recorder, and then I write it out word for word, because I know I'm going to find some different vocabulary. Digu raiku ba. That's a word for sin. It's hard to explain what that means in English. So many of these words come closer to the Hebrew and Greek than English. It means like stinking, rotten garbage. It's no good, it's bad, it's awful, it's wrong. It means all those things in English. So I said to them, okay, tell me, what do you consider bad or wrong in your culture? Oh, well, one thing in our culture, you shouldn't lie. Another one in our culture, you shouldn't steal. And then the old man said, well, you shouldn't kill. Killing is wrong. We know killing is wrong. We're so grateful for Australia and the missionaries who have helped us to stop all this tribal fighting. It's wrong. And then the old man said, and you should never, ever sleep with another man's wife and commit adultery. And then they said, well, one of the most important in our culture? One of the most important is you should never, ever, ever show disrespect to the elders, and especially to your mother and your father. I said, whoa. Where did you get this? Who told you this? Where did this come from? Oh, our ancestors. They've been passing it down for generation to generation to generation, oh my friends. How encouraging this should be to us. How is it that Christianity works far and above any other religion in the world? How does it work in your community? How does it work in your family? How does it work in Chicago, New York, China, Russia, Africa? My friends, it works because everybody's been created in God's image, and the laws of God are written on the hearts of all men, and there is a universal code. It's not what is right in your eyes. There is a universal code, and it's on the hearts of every single person in the world. And that's why Jesus can use people like you and me. He's prepared everybody out there. He's prepared the people across the street and your neighbors, your family, the world. And he's chosen to use people like you and me. Those 14 little boys, they stuck with me for 23 years. They're leaders now. They're married and have families. They became the first readers. They became the first teachers. They became the first Christians with the old man. Now today, they're in the village. All of them leaders of our church. 6 of those 14 little boys became pastors. How does that work? The most amazing part of the story, not one of them got seriously ill, and not one of them died. And when you think about the fact that life expectancy was between 30 and 35 years, infant mortality rate 90%, the village people are still talking about that today. And when we finally got close to finishing, they kept saying, well, Marilyn, when are we going to go see your village? I said, my village? My village is a long way away. Well, we just want to come to your country and just say thank you to all the people that are supporting you and giving you money so we could have Papa God's carving in our own language. I said, well, it costs a lot of money. Of course, they didn't know anything about how much anything was. Round-trip ticket is about $3,000. Well, that's nothing to them. They said, well, can't we just ask Papa God to give it to us? So I gave them a list of all my churches, my supporting churches. I said, here's the list. Start praying. I said, you can even write them a letter. 6 churches bought a round-trip ticket for 6 guys. Can you imagine? I'm bringing 6 men home to the United States of America. How do you prepare them? Clothes. Oh my goodness. Anyway, my sister and I were working very hard. One of the things they said, really, really tell us all about your culture because we don't want to offend anybody in your country. If we were that sensitive to other cultures in the world, wow. So we set a table with plates and 2 forks and 2 knives and 2 spoons and try to teach them, start from the outside and move in because we're going to be in a lot of homes and learn how to eat with forks and knives. And I said, now, in our country, women are first. You got to let the women go first, open the door for the women, pull the chair out for the women. They said, that is the dumbest thing we have ever heard. Well, we prepared them for about a whole year, trying to think of everything that we could possibly think of. I can write a book about our time in the United States of America. We were in 29 states, 200 meetings. We were in the White House, and stop and think. They were these little boys running around the jungle naked. I remember getting in that 747 plane, the biggest flying canoe that they have ever seen. And it was full because it was on December the 2nd. And, coming into Chicago in December when it was 40 below zero, the coldest it gets in our village is like 79 degrees, and that's it. Anyway, so we're cruising along just fine, and we're up there, and we have a whole center of the plane. There's my sister and I and 6 men, and it's hard to be inconspicuous because they're black and we're white and we're speaking this different language, and they're so excited. And most of the plane were Australians going back to Sydney. But anyway, so we're cruising along, and pretty soon one of the guys says that he has to go to the bathroom. I said, oh my goodness, they don't have toilets. And I said to my sister, toilets on the plane are very complex. I said, somebody's got to show them how to do it. And Shirley said, well, I'm not showing them. The thing is, it was Jonah Mayak, and he was way at the far end. And the thing is, to explain to go to the bathroom is very explicit. It's not bad language or anything like that. Number one is just piss piss, that's it. Number two is peck peck. And if you have diarrhea, it's peck peck water. Anyway, so Jonah, we've been cruising for about 2 hours, and he says in a long voice so that Shirley and I could hear them, "Melano, be like, go piss, piss." I thought, oh my gosh. Somebody has to show him. So I said, okay, I'll show him. So here I am, black guy, white woman, going down the aisle of the plane. We both go into the toilet together. And you know how tight that is? I mean, we're just, And so I was afraid, if they went, they wouldn't fasten the door. And the thing is, they were taught to just straddle a hole. Australia tried to induce, straddle the hole. So we were afraid they were going to stand on top of the toilet. So I said, okay, so we're in there. I said, now me like showing you a little whale ball piss piss, okay? So stand up straight. Stand up right in front of the toilet. I said, you can't stand on top of the toilet. You can stand up on top of the toilet. You stand down here. Stand right in the front. Now shoot it right in the hole. Now don't mess up the toilet. Can bug it up in this fella toilet. Don't bug it up the toilet, And so, okay, now time you finish on piss piss. Okay, time you go peck peck. Okay, you must sit down. You got to sit down. So I'm showing them how to do this. So sit down. Now go peck peck, okay? Time you finish on peck peck, kiss him this fella paper. Now clean him out good. Can bug it up in clothes. Don't mess up your clothes. All right, now push this thing. And then it goes away. Where does it go? I said, I don't know where it goes. He said, like a tank or something. Well, you save it, you mean? You save it? I said, oh. So we come out of the toilet there on the plane, and I mean, every eye was riveted on us. And I just said, hey, listen, folks, this is going to be a long trip. I'm just showing them how to do it. That's it.